The physical wounds will heal, but the mental toll of the weeks of torture will stay with these people, especially those who are so young, forever. Joining me now is psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober. Thank you for your time. We've been told that the families who are receiving their loved ones back have been told not to ask questions. Why is that so important, to let these who have suffered so much to heal slowly in their own time?
Well, that's exactly what it is. We want them to heal at their own speed and on their own schedule. Sometimes talking about it can actually re-traumatize them and make it worse. We know that people with PTSD are much more fragile and they really need time to heal. People at greater risk for PTSD are people who've had previous trauma, maybe who have a history of depression and anxiety, who use substances. With children, they don't verbalize their feelings as much, so they may act out. They may say they have a stomachache, or they may feel sick and they may not want to go to school. There's all sorts of things that will present themselves more as physical behaviors than as them verbalizing their feelings.
Talk a little bit, if you can, about the intake process for people who have experienced this type of trauma, particularly the young kids. What do they go through in the first few weeks after being back in safety?
Well, it's important to try to keep them on a normal, and I use the word normal relatively, schedule. Try to get them to sleep, to eat, to hydrate, to take care of themselves, and do it in a way that puts them on a routine, because a routine promotes stability, it promotes predictability, and it's the best way that you could sort of reintegrate them back into their lives. But we know that people who undergo trauma like this, the rate of PTSD may be as high as 50%. So it really depends what they've witnessed, what they've been exposed to. Did they have loved ones who died in the process? There's tremendous variability between individual to individual on who will develop this disorder.
Just like in grief, I know there are stages of dealing with trauma. What do those look like?
So for a lot of people, it's shock in the first month, a numbing of, if you will. They may not even believe that they've gone through it. And that, again, may present in ways that are nonverbal. But I will say that in general, some of the toughest prisons to escape from are the ones that we have in our own minds. We create our own dreams and our worst nightmares. For people that have undergone trauma, they can reinvent themselves. They can take that pain and that suffering and turn it into something truly transformative. So I think that's the message.
Right. I mean, our brain's ability to compartmentalize. What does our brain do with bad memories, traumatic memories?
So traumatic memories are actually stored a little bit differently than episodic memories or memories of things that you've done. They engage a part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala has the ability to remember the emotional memory of things. It's the same type of memory that we talk about in people with addiction or soldiers who are coming off the field of battle. And these can be very, very powerful memories. And they're associated with these symptoms of PTSD, such as intrusive thoughts, avoidance, negative states of mood and thinking. So these are things that we talk about when we talk about how the brain stores these types of memories.
And we also talk about kids being resilient in so many situations. And some of these kids were physically harmed. Some were kept in isolation. We saw parents who were no longer there when these kids were released. Over time, do they begin to be healed by talking about it?
The majority of children will bounce back. They will be resilient. They will rise above the adversity. The PTSD will most likely show up in the minority of people that have undergone this situation. Now, I mean, that doesn't diminish the fact that it's an absolutely awful, horrific, brutal, savage attack against them and their families, but most kids will bounce back.
And what do they do to avoid triggers, and what might those triggers look like in everyday life moving forward?
For some people, those triggers may not even be things that you would think about. It could be certain sounds, certain smells, certain things that they hear. So it's really important, again, to try to cling to that routine and try to get them back on a schedule as soon as possible and deal with things as they come up. Get them on a regular sleep schedule, trying to go to sleep the same time every night, wake up the same time every morning. Get them back to that routine, which will promote stability.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.